2015 at 7 o'clock. And this is the regular meeting of the Wayne-Westland Community Schools Board of Education. I'd like to start with having a Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Harris, would you lead us in the pledge this evening?
I'd love to.
Thank you.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Item 118.16, roll call. Mrs. Madell.
Mr. Griffin.
Present.
Mrs. Walker.
Present.
Dr. Weaver.
Present.
Mrs. Hines.
Present.
Mrs. Madison.
Present.
I am here, and Mr. Buckaloo.
Present.
7.
7 here. Thank you. Recognitions, presentations. Dr. Harmala.
Yes, I'm going to do a very quick handoff to Assistant Superintendent John Albrecht.
Thank you, Dr. Harmon. Mr. President, members of the Board of Education, Dr. Harmon and Don Harris, President of WEA, facilitated a team of teachers and principals in the exploration of team teaching as an option to deliver instruction to elementary students. That team is here tonight to present a summary of their work as a step toward being able to implement that for the fall. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to them, ask them to introduce themselves and tell you about their work.
Good evening. My name is Lori Basio, and I'm here to share the work that our committee completed. First, I'd like to introduce the members that are present tonight. Stacy Carey, Tim Carney, Stephanie Mueller, Brenda Raymond, Barb Solars. Our quest to have teaming reinstated into our classroom started from the moment that Dr. Harmala became our superintendent. Dr. Harmala met with the Adams staff and listened to our ideas. We were informed at that time that because she was new to the district and wasn't aware or familiar with the reasons teaming was removed, that we could revisit the topic at the end of the school year. The teaming committee formed was open to all interested staff members. We had representation from 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th grade, and 2 co-principals from our 5th and 6th grade buildings. I know you heard me say it with the science committee meetings, but it's worth repeating. This district is changing, and it's a great thing. The district committees that I have been a part of lately are organized meetings that you go and gather information, discuss ideas, analyze, explore, review, and create a plan or a proposal that will lead to an enhanced educational experience for our students. Our committee is very proud of the work that we did to explore the topic of teaming. We discussed the task, reviewed current research, explored the legal requirements, looked at the past history and practices in our district, analyzed the information. We identified the current state, desired state, and the best practices to address the gaps between the current state and the desired state. Finally, we formulated the recommendations. I'd like to thank all of our committee members, even the ones that aren't here tonight, who worked to make this process so enlightening. A special thank you to Mark Caesar and Kelly Kaminsky for their insight as co-principals. The committee would also like to thank Dr. Harmala and Don Harris for not only facilitating and organizing the committee, but for being supportive in our quest. Thank you to the Board of Education members for your continued support.
Thank you.
You received in your Friday packet the recommendations and the summary report.
Are we done?
Yes.
Could I have a motion for support?
So moved.
Support.
Mrs. Walker, Mrs. Madison for support. And discussion?
I have one quick thing. I'd like to say that I'm really glad that you guys are bringing teaming back. Carol and I went to go visit some schools, and the teachers were really excited about that. So I'm glad that we're able to have, happy medium. Something is really exciting, and it's going to be a great school year.
I want to thank all of you for your hard work in making this happen. It's unfortunate we did stop doing this because I highly believe in it. I spent most of my teaching career in a teaming situation. It's very supportive of each other. To be in a team, the students appreciate and value the information they get from more than one person. And my feeling is together, working as a team, you become a very formidable force when it comes to education. So thank you for giving of your time to make this process work.
As a parent, I've had 4 children experience both sides of the spectrum, and I'm very proud and honored that everybody found such passion in bringing back the team teaching and being patient and diligent to continue the quest for it. I would like to ask if one person would mind at least getting up and just giving like a brief clip so that the viewers at home sitting at night could have just a little bit of information on it, just something short and quick to explain what team teaching is, because I do feel it's something very, very important and for us to feel proud of to have coming back into our district.
Any member want to speak about that? All right.
Only one short straw.
You want to talk about departmentalism and,
I'm just talking.
yeah, just.
Just
All right, here we go.
tell them the story.
All right. Team teaching is something that, I'm on 21 years in this district, and more than half of it, I was a team teacher. And the reason so many of us were so passionate about it was because it gives us such an opportunity to have people who feel extremely strong or passionate in a certain area be able to get with other people who maybe share passion in another subject, to get together. And it gives the kids so many opportunities to get, differentiated instruction from different people, learning how to work together in a group. And, am I forgetting anything here? Want me to add?
It's not
It's
all
just-
encompassing in the sense that
Yeah, it's
every
not-
teacher is teaming, but it's an option. It's another variety of
Yeah.
kids can gain student
Keep
growth.
going, yeah, exactly. And we have found in the past that it's been very beneficial to the students too, because it gives them opportunity to work with different people in a day setting and to make more connections throughout the day. And because they are getting to know more teachers, there seems to be more of a community feel in the buildings when this occurs.
Kind of like the village, bringing up the child.
That's right, takes a village. So we're extremely happy about it. And, like I said, it's an option for any teacher. Whichever way they'd like to go is fine. But I know a majority of teachers, at least I can speak in our building, are extremely thrilled. Adams, we had a huge amount of people at the meetings, and we're just really excited. Any other questions? Did I cover it?
Perfect. It's an excellent program, and it's an extra additional feature that we bring to our community, and I'm very proud and appreciative of it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Ms. Madison.
I have a comment. I don't have the experience with team teaching that you folks do, but as a student in high school, I was a part of a humanities program that was team taught, and I benefited from the expertise of 2 teachers who really knew, on the one hand, world history, and on the other, English literature. And it seemed like it worked just perfect. I've never really team taught as a teacher in the district, but I have taught collaboratively with the special education program. And one thing that I took away from that is when you're working with another teacher, it's very much like a marriage. If you got the right 2 people, it's a beautiful thing. And you better be willing to do a lot of give and take to get over those rough spots. But it's well worth the effort. I commend you. I wish you luck. And as I understand it, you're going to be taking notes as you go along and citing those things that really went well and also those things that didn't go well so that we can improve the product moving forward. I wish you all the best. This is not really something that the Board of Education needs to approve of. in the sense that we need a voice vote, but I would like a voice of approval. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much. Thank you. I'll give you a second if you need to make those lesson plans.
You can holler too if you want this time.
Item 120.16, citizen comments, agenda items. I need a motion.
So move.
Mrs. Madison?
No, no,
I got it.
No, you don't need a vote for citizen comments.
Oh, I apologize.
I was skipping over
I'm
that.
one step ahead. I do
Yes.
apologize.
You just need to ask if there's anybody.
Is anyone wishing to make a comment? Move forward. I was so set to do the consent agenda.
I
Now
was
we'll do
too.
that. 121.16 consent agenda. I need a motion.
So moved.
Mrs. Madison and Mrs. Walker for a second. And before we get any further in the discussion, Dr. Harmel?
Yes, we need to let you know that you are missing one page out of the standard application for the cooperative agreements for our technical program. So if you look on page 23 and 24 of your agenda, you'll see 11, 12, 13 numbered items in the agreement that's there. But if you back up a page, you'll see we're missing some items between 8 and 11. And that's a standard contract, so we certainly would appreciate your approval, and we'll get you that page. But if that concerns you, then you may want to hold that off, and we'll get agreement later. It's the standard agenda we always bring you for cooperative agreements.
And it's my understanding that we've seen that wording several times already this year.
Many times, and I appreciate Don Harris, because as many times as we all look at this, he caught that and let us know. So we appreciate everybody's eyes.
Fantastic. Anyone have a question or a comment on the consent agenda? Seeing done, Mrs. Madell, a roll call vote?
Dr. Weaver?
Yes.
Mrs. Walker?
Yes.
Mrs. Madison?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Mrs. Hines?
Yes.
I vote yes, and Mr. Buckaloo?
I vote yes as well.
7-0.
That's a 7-0 vote, and that brings us to 122.16, renew and approval. We have 3 sections of policy that we're going to deal with, and we're going to begin with section 300. Dr. Harmel,
We're going to start with section 3000.
excuse me.
That's okay. Pages 29 and 30 in your booklet. And we're going, Jenny, wherever you've disappeared to, we've lost our connection. So we're going to do this the same way we did it last time, whereas in your manual, you have the recommended changes, and 3000 series was reviewed by our Finance Committee. On the screen, I will scroll the existing policy, and Kevin Sutton will share with us the recommendation for either change, move to administrative guidelines, or the like. And then in the additional package you were provided, the color-coded section, we're working with the green language for the 3000 series. So he'll walk us through that, and if you're okay to start, I'll catch up. What she would be showing is our old policy. Okay?
Good evening. A pleasure to be here again as we continue our efforts to move through the comprehensive policy revision process. 3 sections of the existing policies before you this evening. Section 3000 on fiscal management, Section 4000 on business management and facilities, and Section 7000 on the instructional program. We're going to go numerically in order. We're going to start with Section 3000. And similar to my last visit, you have some papers in front of you, and the easiest way to do it, you have your spiral-bound, color-coded section, which has the revisions and the policies from the applicable section, and then you have the revision policy matrix for each section, which goes existing policy by existing policy. identifies the action to be taken with respect to that policy, and then gives you the reference for where it's at in the spiral-bound book. So we end up with a little bit of flipping back and forth to cover it all. But that is the process that I would propose going through as we went through before, unless the board had a desire to do something different based on our prior experience in going through the 8,000 series.
I think we're fine this way.
Okay. Then I'll jump right into the 3,000 series, and I know Dr. Harmala will catch up when everything's posted. Again, both 3,000, 4,000, and 7,000, we've met with the respective committees that would be responsible for these sections, and the recommended actions are the product of those conversations, as well as my meetings with Dr. Harmala on the topic. And so we start at the top with policy 3050 on budget planning. So we start at the top of the matrix and we move left to right. So the recommended action is that it is replaced by the LNA policy that you find on page 22 with respect to budget planning. So existing budget planning gets replaced with the new language for budget planning. Any questions on 3050? And I think what we got to last time was that I kept moving unless somebody raised their hand and told me to stop. Is that an acceptable
And
way
that
to
would
do it
work
this
fine.
time?
That would
Okay,
work
perfect.
fine this evening.
Perfect. We'll move then to policy 3100, which is addresses fund balance. And this was an area where we did not have a specific policy in the LNA policies on fund balance. So on the recommendation of the Finance Committee, we have added a section to page 23 that is specific to fund balance and adopts generally the language that is in the currently existing policy 3100. So you see that at the bottom of page 23. Moving then next to 3170, which is the existing policy on line item transfer authority. This is our first reference to move to administrative guidelines. And as you may recall from the last time I was here, there are a variety of items that we are moving to administrative guidelines, which doesn't mean that they disappear. They get moved out of the policy manual, which is how we got 435 pages to begin with, and ultimately will be moved to administrative guidelines, which will be more of the meat and potatoes of how we're going to do these things, as opposed to the policies which sort of lay out the general vision for certain aspects. And so line item transfer authority 3170 is a recommendation to move to administrative guidelines, the general concept being embodied in the general section on page 22. 3200, state and federal funding proposals and applications. Again, a recommendation to move to administrative guidelines, along with 3280 on borrowing and 3290 on shared cost projects. All of those are recommended to move to administrative guidelines. Policy 3300 on the investment of funds is replaced generally by the LNA policy on page 22, which has a section at the bottom of page 22 dedicated specifically to investments. And there's some other language in 3300 that would move to administrative guidelines to help inform the district's actions on investments. 3500 on audits. It's replaced by the LNA policy, page 23, which has a section dedicated specifically to the topic of audits. 3600 and 3605, which deal with the reimbursement of expenses and district credit cards. Again, very specific items that we recommend moving to administrative guidelines. And then we go to the second page of the revision matrix for the 3000 series. And we are looking at policy 3610 with respect to purchasing goods and services. This is replaced by the LNA policy on page 22, which is towards the middle of the page and is specific to the topic of purchasing. Administrative leeway, policy 3620. We have actually added language from the 3620 administrative leeway policy to page 24, which is actually the facilities and operations section. And we've done it in the middle of the page. You'll see there on page 24 under a heading that we have amended to school crisis response and closure. And we're looking specifically at the green language in the middle of page 24. And in essence, this language embodies what we have in 3620 now and allows administration to take those necessary actions in the event of severe weather, severe cold weather, other natural disasters, which we hope never occur. But should they occur, the power of the administration is provided to take whatever actions need to be taken to address such crises and or closures caused by unpredictable events. Any questions on 3620? Moving then to 3650, 3660, and 3690. These are cooperative purchasing, bid and quotation requirements, and local purchasing, 3650, 3660, and 3690. Recommendation to move them all to administrative guidelines. The general guidelines for purchasing are contained on page 22. These policies will be moved to administrative guideline to supplement those general policies on page 22. 3800 is student activity fund management. We have added language from policy 3880 to page 8 of the LNA policies under school district clubs. You'll see a very short amount of language in green towards the bottom third of the page. We have school district clubs and other activities, and there's 2.5 sentences added there, which sound from policy 3800 on student activity fund management. We'll move then to 3900. Existing policy 3900 deals with surplus books, equipment, and supplies. Page 22 of the LNA policies has a section for surplus property and a subsection that is specific to equipment and supplies. So that is generally replaced by the LNA policy, but we also felt that there was some language in 3900 that would be appropriate to be administrative guidelines under textbooks and other instructional materials, which is page 15 of the LNA policies. And so those administrative guidelines will ultimately fall under the page 15 language and or the page 22 language to sort of separate 3900 out a little bit. Policy 3950 deals with surplus land or buildings, again replaced by the LNA policies towards the bottom third of page 22, surplus property section, specific land or buildings. And lastly, policy 3995 is a policy that dealt with building trade homes, and we didn't have anything along those lines in our policy, so you'll see at the end on page 23, towards the middle, we've added a section specific to building trade homes, which has its foundation in policy 3995. That's generally the matrix, though Dr. Harmala did point out one revision to me when we got here. On page 22 at the very top, under general, the last section discusses under the supervision of the superintendent, financial reports and statements will be prepared and submitted to the board on a monthly basis or more frequently if requested by the board. Dr. Harmala, did you want to speak to that?
Yes, because as a board, Jim has provided those to you more on a quarterly basis, and this was the standard LNA language. I wanted to verify that we would continue as we have, and if so, then I would recommend we go up to submitted to the board, drop the remainder of that line, and just say requested by the board. So it would read the whole sentence, under the supervision of the superintendent, financial reports and statements will be prepared and submitted to the board as requested by the board. And Jim would continue in the same practice he has been in terms of giving you updates. You would still receive your monthly check statements and the investment statements that we provide. So that would be a recommendation there. And President Bucklew, I have one more edit that I think we should consider, if we're okay to move to that. And that's on page 23 of 33 in the LNA policy. Because under the Building Trade Homes, I spoke with Steve Kay. The Building Trades Advisory Committee jumped out at me as I don't think that's the name of what it is today, and indeed it is not. And additionally, the language was from our 1996 policy, where the partnership we had with the city was different than it is today. So because we have the partnership with the city and we approve the contracts, but the funding for those homes is different, I would recommend we strike that second to the last sentence, the entire sentence. We would remove expenditures must be reviewed by the Building Trades Advisory Committee and approved by the superintendent. The introduction requires the approval, and we bring those contracts to you for approval as well. So that would be my two suggestions.
Excuse me, what you're suggesting is that we'll make the building trade homes section appropriate by eliminating the one sentence without any addition?
Correct. And then if you would also change vocational to career technical, because that is also quite dated.
Did you have anything additional?
That's it. Thank you.
On 3,000 physical management, I need a motion.
So moved. Support.
Motion by Mrs. Walker, support by Mrs. Madison. Comments, discussion? Sir,
Yeah,
Mr. Griffin, I
I
apologize.
just want to say that, I think that we've really cleaned up this issue by moving the daily kinds of things that have to be done by the administration, which we hire to run the school district, and these are actual policies now. And we just had too many things in the policies, and that's why for the public purview, that's why we're cleaning these up. So the board only deals with the policy issues, the administration deals with those day-to-day kinds of issues that sometimes have to be changed on a daily basis or on a monthly basis or on a yearly basis with their review. And I really like the way that we've cleaned up the financial status here, among other things. That happens to be the one that I was on, and I like the conciseness of it, so that when you pick it up and read it, you understand what the board's role is and what the administration's role is. And we all have a role, obviously, of maintaining district fiscal management, but I really am happy with how this turned out in the committee level and here to the board. Thank you.
Anyone else have a comment or a question?
I have a comment.
Mrs. Madell?
This last weekend, I just took a class, and one of it involves one of the policies that we just moved over to administrative guideline, and they talked exactly about this. And we talked about the difference between a large school district and a small school district. Maybe in a small school district, the school board does need to be involved in a lot of these discussions about what to happen if you have to close a school, or if there's a fire, earthquake, some kind of natural disaster. But in a large school district, it is not the business of the board to deal with the day-to-day operation. We have enough employees and administrators to take care of that. So I can see where a lot of this needs to come out of our policy.
Anyone else? Roll call vote, Mrs. Madell?
Mrs. Madison,
Yes.
Mrs. Hines,
Yes.
Dr. Weaver,
Yes.
Mrs. Walker,
Yes.
Mr. Griffin,
Yes.
Mrs. Madell, hello, I vote yes, and Mr. Buckaloo.
I vote yes, and that gives us a unanimous 7-0 vote. Mr. Sutton, 4,000, business management and facilities.
Thank you, sir. Yes, we'll now move to the 4,000 series, which again, you have a matrix. This one is orange because the revisions in the spiraled packet, to the extent they apply to the 4,000 series, are in orange.
And even though yours look yellow, pretend that's your orange. That's how it copied. I have no idea why it looks yellow to you.
Well, the original toner intent was orange in order to correspond. But if there are questions based on color coding, please let me know. We will begin with policy 4010, building grounds and maintenance. This is generally covered by the LNA policy on page 24, dealing with the two sections. Goal, certainly about providing suitable facilities, as well as safety and security of those facilities. Policy 4015, dealing with insurance program, is generally replaced by the LNA policies on page 23, which deals with risk management. So we're actually going back a page to risk management, which covers the issues that have been identified in the insurance program. To the extent there is supplemental information within 4015, the recommendation is to move that information to administrative guidelines. Policy 4040, dealing with safety, is generally covered within the safety and security section of the LNA policies. So there is a recommendation to move the content of 4040 to administrative guidelines. Policy 4050, environmental health and safety, employee indemnification, is generally replaced by the LNA policy on hazardous chemicals and substances on page 24. Policy 4060 is the current policy on energy conservation, and this is the first recommendation to strike that we've had this evening. And as we discussed last time, the recommendation to strike is in essence a recognition that we don't need the policy anymore for a variety of reasons that may exist. Energy conservation, Dr. Harmala, do we have it up? 4060.
There you go.
And if I recall our discussion correctly, within the committee and within administration, we're already undertaking these efforts to have energy conservation within the district as good practice and common sense, as opposed to it being a matter of policy. So there is a recommendation to strike the energy conservation policy 4060. Moving on to 4080, emergency closings. We have added language in the middle of page 24 under the heading of school crisis response and closure. It's the language there in the middle of page 24 in orange, which in essence authorizes the superintendent close schools when there are emergencies. It does not eliminate the debate which follows the closure of schools or the non-closure of schools, but it does provide the opportunity to do so in the event of inclement weather. So that language from 4080 has been implemented into the LNA policies. 4090, 4100, and 4110, traffic and parking controls, environment, and security are all issues which have been recommended to move to administrative guidelines, very specific things, moving them to administrative guidelines, the general principles that drive those items being contained within the safety and security provisions of the LNA policies on page 24. As we move to the bottom of the matrix on page 1, policy 4120 on theft and vandalism. Generally, we have addressed the issue of student behavior on page 9 in our student section that we dealt with last time. And to the extent there are specifics for theft and vandalism, we would be moving those to the administrative guidelines and/or the student code of conduct to address behavior of theft and vandalism. Moving to page 2 of the matrix, policy 4250 deals with copyright compliance. Generally, there are provisions in the LNA policies at page 32 that deal with copyrighted works. There is a recommendation to move policy 4250 to administrative guidelines. Moving to policy 4251, the printing of political literature. When we discussed this item, we thought that it wasn't really properly placed in the 4000 series. We thought it might be best to review it as we did the 9000 series. And so the recommendation is to sort of hold 4251 in abeyance and address it at the committee level and at the administrative level as we discuss the 9000 series, which I think will be coming up here in the next few months. So the recommendation for now is to set 4251 on political literature aside and deal with it as part of the 9000 series. 4260 is a policy dealing with fax machines. This is another recommendation to strike for, I think, reasons that are somewhat obvious. Fax machines becoming an obsolete technology, and certainly the leeway to use facilities and use the resources of the district are there absent a specific policy on fax machines. So we've recommended striking that. Policy 4300 and 4430 are both policies that deal with transportation. We've taken language from both and added a new section on page 25 of the LNA policies called transportation. We've created 2 subcategories underneath the transportation section, one for student transportation and one for business transportation that generally translates the spirit of 4300 and 4430 into the LNA policies to make them consistent with current existing policy. To the extent that there is additional information in 4300 or 4430, which would be beneficial on the topics of transportation, the recommendation is to move those to administrative guidelines. Any questions on transportation? I'll move to 4460, which deals with the food service program, and there is a recommendation to strike. And Dr. Harmala, can you speak to the recommendation to strike the food service program policy?
Actually, I'm going to let Jim tell you a little bit about that, but basically, we run a food service program for our students. We don't need a policy to do so, and there are state and federal guidelines by which we need to do that. I don't know if, Jim, you want to add anything in particular, but basically, we have to follow the law, and we do in both cases, so.
State and federal law pretty much sums it up, yeah.
So consistent with our efforts to try to eliminate, excuse me, eliminate those things we don't need. Recommendation to do so with the food service program. Moving on to 4470, bidding the food service program. Again, the provisions of page 22, the general business guidelines have us covered in that regard from a policy perspective. And with respect to the specifics of policy 4470 and bidding of the food service program, we have a recommendation to move those sections to administrative guideline. Policy 4500 deals with data management, and we have made a recommendation to add language to the acceptable use and data protection section of the LNA policies located on page 28. At one point, it was just called acceptable use. It's now called acceptable use and data protection. And we have added language from both 4500, data management, and 4510, technology, to these sections, the language you see there in orange, to incorporate the existing policies 4500 and 4510 on data management and technology. Moving to policy 4700, construction renovation. Here we have another recommendation to strike. And I believe, Mr. Larson-Shiler, do you have any comment on 4700, construction renovation, or Dr. Harmelo?
Let's see. I'm going to have to see if I can see this. This one's not jumping out at me at the moment.
Keep going.
Food service.
Thank you. Bigger, bigger font.
Can you see those numbers?
Yes. That's it.
Yep, okay. Oh, I think that we decided when we had the conversation, if you go back to the goal on facilities and operations, that the intent of the policy is that our school buildings and all of our facilities would serve the needs of the school district, and when they no longer serve that need, we make a decision about that. So that was the essence of that policy.
So in this case, construction renovation being sort of repetitive of that general concept articulated under the goal of facilities and operations. Similar with 4710 on new construction and 4770 regarding architects. Generally, the goal is to provide suitable facilities and to take whatever action is necessary in order to provide those facilities. And so there's recommendation to move 4710 and 4770 to administrative guidelines. That takes us to the third page of the matrix and the last two policies in the 4000 series. 4800 regarding the naming of buildings and/or major additions, and 4810 regarding building plaques. And there was no such language in the LNA policies, so at the bottom of page 25, under the heading of naming, recognition, and plaques, we have added language in orange to incorporate the spirit of 4800 and 4810 into the LNA policy manual. And that is the 4000 series.
I'd just like to point out, a few board meetings ago, Trustee Weaver mentioned considering and looking into social media policy for our staff and our students. That fits under actually the 5000 series, which is personnel. So my recommendation is that we don't confuse it with data management technology, but address that particular issue in the 5000 series when we talk about personnel and behavior there.
I move that we accept the changes and recommendation of the 4000 series.
Support.
Motion by Mrs. Walker and second by Mrs. Madison. Discussion? Comments? Seeing none. Mrs. Madell, roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Hines.
Yes.
Mr. Griffin.
Yes.
Mrs. Madison.
Yes.
Mrs. Walker.
Yes.
Dr. Weaver?
Yes.
I vote yes, and Mr. Buckaloo?
I vote yes, and that gives us a unanimous 7-0 vote. And brings us to 7,000 instructional program. Mr. Sutton?
Thank you, sir. With respect to the 7,000 series, which deals with the instructional program, again, you have another matrix. This matrix, depending on how your printer works, is in purple. And what, purplish.
Purplish.
I'll take that.
What I will say here is this is an area, this is a series where there are, great effort has been put in over the years to really drill down and have a lot of specificity on a number of topics that generally fall under the area of curriculum development and/or learning and achievement. And so there are a variety of recommendations throughout the matrix to move certain policies to administrative guidelines, probably more than we've seen in any of the other matrices. But the reason for that is just because it's so specific that it really falls under the general heading of curriculum development and learning and achievement. I will also note that on the matrix, in your far right column, there are several references to curriculum development on page 13. I apologize, that is a typo. The curriculum development section is on page 14. Those pesky page returns got me once again. When you see the reference to curriculum development on page 13, it should be a reference to page 14. We'll start with policy 7010, the school district organization plan. And there is a recommendation to strike here, generally because the topic is covered under page 6, learning and achievement, which identifies the goals of the district in providing a cohesive and comprehensive education program for all students. So there's a recommendation to strike. Also, if I recall correctly, Dr. Harmala, in recognition of the fact that these things change in terms of the designation of how we want to do grades and whatnot, the idea is that we're delivering an effective education program, and from time to time, to Mr. Griffin's point, things might change from year to year. So the idea is to have generally the policies that allow us to deliver an educational program, and the specifics of how we deviate the grades may change from time to time. So there's a recommendation to strike 7010. Moving to 7050, curriculum development. This is generally replaced by the LNA policy, again on page 14. At the top, curriculum development. That section lays out the general principles of development that are to be utilized by the district in addressing curriculum development. We've also added some language at the bottom of page 6. It's very difficult to see because it's in dark purple at the bottom of learning and achievement. That last sentence under the section of curriculum has been added on page 6, and that comes from policy 7050 that currently exists on curriculum development. As you look down the matrix for the rest of the page, 7051 on curriculum council, 7052 multicultural education, 7060 curriculum guides and course outlines, 7110 basic program, 7112 athletic/activity eligibility, 7120 curriculum alignment, 7140 dropout prevention program, 7150 alternative school programs. All recommendation to move these sections, which are all important and all have very good content, but they fall under the general heading of curriculum development. Recommendation to move all of them to administrative guidelines under the topic of curriculum development. Moving to page 2 of the matrix, we start at the top with policy 7160, which is a special program, is the name of the section, and that's a recommendation to strike policy 7160 on special programs. 7163 on the topic of substance abuse. Again, recommendation to strike the section, not because preventing substance abuse is not important, but generally that can be incorporated into the curriculum and the learning and achievement standards that are put in place by the district for all students. 7165 addresses the topic of at-risk students, similar to some of the sections we saw on the prior page, and a recommendation to move to administrative guidelines. 7200 talked about partnerships in the development of curriculum. And there's a recommendation to strike because the district is already doing that now. They're already undertaking those efforts to have partnerships from a curricular standpoint on a daily basis. And so there's a recommendation to strike that. 7250 deals with the adult education program, and again, falls again under the heading of curriculum development. There's a recommendation to move to administrative guidelines, so that important language is still there, but the policy falls under curriculum development. 7350, dealing with instructional resources. This is replaced by the LNA policy on page 15, which deals with textbooks and other instructional materials. So that, the spirit of that 7350 is encapsulated in the specific section of textbooks and other instructional materials. Treatment of minority groups in textbooks, 7360. There is a recommendation to strike here. I believe largely, Dr. Harmala, correct me if I'm wrong, based on the sort of dated nature of the language in policy 7360. And also, it is certainly within the discretion of curriculum development to have the types of materials that we're going to deliver students a 21st century education that is consistent with the way things should be referred to these days, as opposed to the current language in 7360. 7400 deals with instructional materials and media centers, and this is generally replaced by the LNA policies throughout this section on page 14 and 15, whether it's textbooks, selection of media center materials, so on and so forth, that is replaced by the existing LNA policies. 7460 deals with instructional television, and there is a recommendation to strike here, again, consistent with the evolution of technology and the way curriculum is being delivered, not exactly up to current standards in terms of how things are being delivered, so there's a recommendation to strike there. Field trips and excursions, 7490, is, if I recall, a fairly lengthy policy, one that we recommend moving to administrative guidelines. Good content, but generally the ability to have field trips and excursions is encapsulated under the topic of curriculum development. The guidance program, 7500, again, important content, but moved to administrative guidelines because it is specific to the curriculum program and the educational program that students will have. 7620 deals with the topic of homework. And much to the delight of many students, there's a recommendation to strike the homework policy, not strike homework, but strike the homework policy. Again, the idea being that the flexibility is provided under curriculum development, achievement, and learning to provide our educators the opportunities to do what they feel is best to deliver a quality education. So there's a recommendation to strike 7620 on homework. 7630 deals with graduation requirements, which of course we want to make sure we have, but to Mr. Griffin's point, these things change from time to time. The state dictates certain things from time to time, so there's a recommendation to move 7630 on graduation requirements to administrative guidelines. That takes us to the third and final page of the matrix. Policy 7650 deals with assessment program, and that's replaced by the LNA policy at pages 6 and 7, which generally details assessments and what actions are to be taken for assessments. That's at the top of the page, carries over to the top of page 7, assessments. So that is replaced by the LNA policy. Policy 7700, evaluation of the instructional program, again, is generally replaced by the curriculum and development policies as well as the learning and achievement policies, and there's a recommendation to move to administrative guidelines. Policy 7750 is a policy that is specific to teaching methods. There is a recommendation to strike policy 7750 with the recognition that the district does have the ability to dictate the curriculum, to dictate the model of curriculum development for its staff. But there is a recommendation to strike 7750. 7755, academic service learning, 7760, controversial issues, and 7770, teaching about religion, all recommended to move to administrative guidelines because the general policy under curriculum and development and learning and achievement cover those topics generally speaking. The final four policies on the matrix, 7800 on school ceremonies and observances, 7900 on school improvement, 7910 on site-based decision-making, and 7950 on no child left behind. There is a recommendation to strike all of those policies as being either repetitive of the law or unnecessary. And that is the 7000 series.
Recommendation to approve?
Move approval.
Support?
Weaver, Mrs. Madison. Any discussion or comments?
Mr. President,
Dr. Weaver?
I want you to admit that you made up the word matrices.
Well, I thought if you watched the Matrix movie enough times, you had to say it that way, I thought, but.
I was just throwing a little humor in there, so, okay, very little.
I just have one comment. Again, this is basically, I think, for the public consumption. We have so many things in our policies that were dictated by state statute, and state statute, as we all know, is amended and changed yearly. And so we're getting rid of those things because they're redundant in the board policies. And so many of these things you say to strike, that's why we're striking them, because we have to abide by the state statute, whatever it is. And just a comment for the public.
Additional comments? I might add, thank you. You've made this very exciting, at least as exciting as this can be.
Exciting.
By my count, we've handled 76 different items this evening, and you've led us through it in a quick and orderly fashion. And while it isn't the most exciting thing, as Mr. Griffin has said, we're going to benefit from it down the road. These are positive changes. I have, if anyone cares to see, our policy manual, and I think you're going to shrink this by about 2/3. And that will make it much easier for board members to get at the information that they need. So I thank you very, very much. Unless there are additional comments, roll call, Mrs. Madell.
Dr. Weaver?
Yes.
Mrs. Hines?
Yes.
Mrs. Walker?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Mrs. Madison?
Yes.
I vote yes, and Mr. Buckaloo?
And I vote yes, and that gives us a 7-0 unanimous vote. It also takes us, if I'm not mistaken, if I can find my agenda. It should take us to 123.16. Review and approval, business services and finance. Mr. Larson Scheidler on the subject of road salt.
Thank you, President Buckaloo. We might need to table this resolution. This is a state consortium bid that the district planned on presenting tonight. The bid was projected to be finalized by the state prior to this board meeting. Unfortunately, we do not have that information. The state has not finalized the contracts. Originally, why we're bringing it to this board meeting was the deadline date to accept it was prior to our September 21st meeting. Due to the delay by the state, they've taken that out to October 1st. So when we get the pricing, we'll bring it back to the board at your September 21st meeting with all the information available.
So if I understand you correctly, we're not running the risk of missing out on road salt or a good price for road salt if we should table at this time?
No, and the importance of it is why we brought it tonight. We had confirmation from the state that we'd have the information last week. We called near the end of the week. We called all morning this morning, and they just said it was not available. And that's when they said the deadline, due to not having the information, it would be postponed until October.
Mr.
So
President,
we should be okay.
Point of order, I don't think we ought to table it, we just ought to remove it from the agenda and let them put it back on it when they're ready. Because if we table it, we got to bring it back off the table.
have to
and
vote
we
to
don't
bring
need
it
to do
back.
that.
Okay.
You actually have a resolution in front of you, Carol Madell, to strike it from the agenda, if you would.
I was getting there.
Okay, great, thank you.
So I would like to propose that the board amend the agenda and remove item 1, 2, 3, 16,
Support.
entitled, I gotta read the
I'm
whole
sorry.
thing, I'm sorry. Thank you for your support. Recommendation to purchase road salt from this evening's agenda.
Support.
He is, and I support it.
You support him too.
I made the motion, by the way.
He gave the motion and I'm supporting it.
We're
No, I
all
made the
supportive.
motion.
Oh,
He's
okay,
supporting
well,
it.
okay, all right.
Well, then I would like to call for a roll call vote
Griffin.
as soon as you catch up.
All right, are we ready to vote then? Mrs. Walker?
Yes.
Mrs. Madison?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Mrs. Hines?
Yes.
Dr. Weaver?
Yes.
I vote yes, and Mr. Buckaloo?
I vote yes as well. We have a unanimous vote, 7-0.
Yep.
And that issue will come before us at another time.
Yes.
Thank you very much. And that brings us to 124.16, Kettering property, release of reverter. And I believe, though I don't see it here, Dr. Harmala, would you like to, excuse me, Mr. Larson Scheidler?
Sure.
I
We do have
apologize.
this information in the packet, so we have it. This relates to two parcels of property within the Kettering property boundaries that currently have restrictions. The parcels are for public use only. Prior to demolishing Kettering, the parcels were under the parking lot and building. We petitioned the state to request removal of the restrictions to allow for non-public use. Removing the restrictions will allow the district to develop or sell the property for public or private use.
Okay, I need a recommendation.
Move approval.
Support.
Dr. Walker and Mrs.
Dr. Weaver?
Dr. Weaver, Mrs. Madison. Discussion, questions?
Just one brief point.
Mr. Griffin?
We know through the chair to Mr. Scheidler, this would allow us to then sell the property and do whatever at that point the board, in their opinion, want to do in terms of developing the property, correct?
Yes. Removes
Because before,
restrictions.
we could not do that with the two properties that were in.
We were
and there
limited to,
restrictions on it.
yeah, public use, so it had to be a governmental entity.
So, well, good job. Thank you.
Thank you.
I always talk about institutional knowledge and how people who've been around a long time know what's going on, where the bodies are buried and what have you. But this goes back to the 1950s, doesn't it?
Yeah, one property in 50, 157, yeah, were donated by the state due to foreclosure.
Very few of us were around and active in 1950.
Probably, yeah.
So we're going to be able to, with the approval of the state legislature, we're going to be able to utilize this property to the benefit of the district, we hope, in the not too distant future.
Without restrictions, yes.
Okay. Anyone else wish to comment or ask a question?
I have a question. Once we vote on this, do I need to read this resolution out loud?
No.
Okay.
Then roll call vote, Mrs. Mattel.
Okay. Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Mrs. Walker?
Yes.
Dr. Weaver?
Yes.
Mrs. Hines?
Yes.
Mrs. Madison?
Yes.
I vote yes, and Mr. Buckaloo?
I vote yes, and once again, we have a 7-0 unanimous vote, and that takes us to 125.16. It's designation of delegates for the Michigan Association of School Boards Delegate Assembly meeting, which I believe is Friday of the conference. We're entitled to...
Thursday. It's Thursday night.
Is it Thursday night? I apologize, of the conference. We're entitled to 4 delegates, and also we're entitled to an equal number of alternates, as I read this. And I guess what I need is an indication from board members wishing to be delegates.
Mr. President, I would like to be a delegate.
I hear Mrs. Walker.
And I would like to be a delegate as well.
I hear Mrs. Hines.
I would like to be a delegate.
And I will offer my services as well.
Mrs. Medell and Dr. Weaver. And I'm willing to serve as an alternate. Are there any other people who will be going who wish to serve as an alternate?
No, I'm gonna have a lot of dental work that day, and I'm not gonna be able to go. So I will vote for those that want to go. It's a bad day.
Well, I don't think that this requires a vote. I think that I see the desire of the board, and I think we're all good with that. And that would allow us to move on to 126.16, Staff Recognition and Appreciation Days. Dr. Harmon?
Yes, this is an annual item we bring to you, and we've identified a number of days to recognize our employee groups. We'd like to continue that this year. For those groups that have an aligned National Recognition Day, we have moved the dates to align with the nationally recognized dates. So with your approval, we will celebrate our employees every day, but in particular on these days.
Move to support.
Second.
The second came from? Okay.
Mrs. Hines.
So we have a motion from Mrs. Walker and a second from Mrs. Hines, Ms. Hines. And unless there is discussion, Mrs. Madell, a roll call vote?
Do you want to just do voice?
Well, we could do that as well. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It carries. And before I jump the gun here, 127.16, Superintendent's Report, Dr. Harmon.
Yes, thank you, President Buckaloo. As you know, our August meeting signifies the end of summer break for everybody. I hope everybody enjoyed their summer, had some relaxing time off to spend with friends and family, and had an opportunity to rest and relax. I look forward to everybody returning to the school year, and I know our students are excited about a new year too, as much as they do sometimes look at it and say, how did it come so fast? I'm looking forward to an opportunity that I'll have this year to address all of our staff as we open the new school year. On September 2nd, I'll share information with all staff that's designed to create a common awareness of our vision, focus, and work that we'll need to do together and throughout the school year to ensure that our students learn and grow and that we successfully meet all of our district goals. We're a very large district, so getting everyone together has presented some challenges in terms of time and location and the logistics, but it's certainly necessary and important for ensuring we all are on the same page and headed in the same direction. As board trustees, if you're able to attend, we'd welcome and appreciate your attendance, and I've provided you with the specific details already of the date, time, and location. I'd like to share some updates from the Michigan Department of Education. As you know, State Superintendent Whiston is now on the job, and he has already made some changes, and we really are thankful for that. The Michigan Department of Ed has changed things for the annual identification of focus and priority schools to a 3-year identification cycle. The next focus and priority school lists will not be determined until the fall of 2017 and then every 3rd year thereafter. This allows district schools and the Michigan Department of Education to focus capacity on intensive interventions and supports for one cohort of schools over a period of 3 years rather than adding new schools to the system every single year. As you know, 6 of our schools were moved off of the Michigan Department of Education's priority and school focus list. Currently, we have 1 priority and 3 focus schools. Because the status of these schools should have been reviewed this year, at this time we're uncertain as to whether this means we continue to carry our noted labels or whether in some way we will have those removed. And we are awaiting word from the Michigan Department of Education as far as that goes. The Michigan Department of Education has also made a commitment to revisit the indicators that they'll use on the accountability scorecard. And while the color indicators on that scorecard have not changed at this point, the Michigan Department of Education is committed to working with stakeholders to determine the most meaningful indicators to use starting in 2017. And certainly with the collaborative approach that we are taking and appreciate, we are happy that they are willing to do the same. Finally, and importantly for all of our students, and I know for our teachers and probably parents as well, the Michigan Department of Education published in their Spotlight newsletter that they are going to make some positive changes in the assessment process for this coming up year. They received over 30,000 survey responses and basically identified that testing took far too long for our students and took up too much instructional time. So what they're going to change is they'll drop the English language arts and math sections from the M step for 11th graders, cutting testing time by up to 8 hours for that group. 11th grade students don't celebrate quite yet because you still have to be assessed in those content areas. It'll just be a component of the SAT test instead of an additional item. In addition, for our students in grades 3 through 8, the performance task section of the English language arts exam will only be given to 5th graders and 8th graders, and this change will cut testing by about 2.5 hours for each of our 3rd grade, 4th grade, 6th grade, and 7th grade students. So I'd like to thank Superintendent Whiston and his staff for really making some expedient and relevant changes for all of our students. Legislatively, along with the work on road funding, a new bill has been introduced for 3rd grade reading. It's of concern to me. Certainly, reading is paramount to the success of our students, not just while they're here in school, but in adult life. I will be providing comments to our local legislators that share my concerns because it is a very prescriptive bill. Specifically, the bill continues to include the idea that retaining students who are not proficient in reading by grade 3 is a part of the solution. The bill allows some waiving of that retention through an approval of the superintendent. In this case, Wayne-Westland, it would be me, although I really believe this decision is best made by teachers and parents on a child-by-child basis. As a longtime educator and a special educator at that, I assure you retention is not the answer for our students. I recognize that we want every student to be a reader, and I want them to all be good readers. We want this as soon as is possible for every student, and by 3rd grade would be excellent, and we strive for that. But I also recognize that each child develops at his or her own rate, and sometimes there's just absolutely nothing wrong with a child who becomes a reader at a grade later than 3rd grade or a later stage in life. If we stop teaching reading at grade 3, then we may have an issue, but we don't. Reading instruction continues, and so does the growth of our individual students. I would strongly encourage our parents to look at this bill and reflect on the growth of your own children. Is retention really the answer as a mandate from the state, or would teaching be a better option? Would a decision between you and your child's teacher, as we do today, be the best approach? I think so. I'd encourage you to look at the bill, and I thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Harmon. Item 128.16, citizen comments, non-agenda items. Mrs. Medill?
Seeing anybody?
There are no comments. Move on to 129.16, review and recommendations, Board of Education. I'd like to start this evening with Dr. Weaver, if I might.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to personally thank the Policy Committee for all their work, and as they continue a Herculean task of working with our policies. You know, it's a great time of year again. I've always loved the fall of the year. I know that some are moaning because it's time to come back to work or whatever the case may be, but for me, it's always been a time of fresh starts and new beginnings. And fresh starts for our students to pay attention from the beginning and excel in your classes. And also new beginning time for all of our employees that are coming back to the district. You know, there's no secret, we've made no secret of it, that we are experiencing very difficult financial times that have very little to do with us. It's because of what the state gives us. And at the same time, though, our employees are coming back full of excitement, ready to fill their callings. And I just wanted to say tonight that we value, and I personally value, every employee in this district. And so I guess just to put it in this form, there's been no discussion, even with the financial difficulties, there's been no discussion of this board as to privatization of services in our district, and nor would I support any attempt to do so. So it may not be a perfect situation financially in our district, but we're all working very hard to resolve our financial problems and to be positive about our situation. So I would just throw it out there, if you hear a rumor or you're out there spreading the rumors, you know, it's without merit that we're not looking into any situation pertaining to that. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Dr. Weaver. Mrs. Mattel?
Along with what Dr. Weaver was stating about privatization, the Mackinac Center has just released a study, and that is probably something that we saw come across our emails this morning. And we had a discussion, Mr. Bucklew and I had a discussion about whether Wayne-Westland was probably part of that number, and I'm sure we are, because we did privatize our food service, and I'm sure that's where they're getting part of their information from, is school districts who have taken one element of an employee group and privatized. But we also have to remember that in order to qualify for best practice monies, we were required to do that. And in an economy where you're looking for every dime, every penny you can find to spend on a child's education in a school district, this was something that was least impactful to our employees, to our students, to our school district, and was an easy thing for us to do in order to qualify for those funds. So when it comes to anybody else, we're in a position here where we can see other school districts and see the angst that they have gone through in making these kind of decisions. Right now, we've got a couple of school districts that are looking to do this at the last minute, and it's not an easy decision to make, but we need to learn from other people too. We need to look at what other school districts have done and how well it has or has not worked. And for the most part, a lot of school districts who have decided to privatize big employee groups, big impactful situations in their school district, it hasn't always worked out the way they thought it was going to work. And there is no way that, as a board trustee sitting here, that I take those kind of decisions lightly. Any decisions that we make financially that impact our students have to be given the time and the effort to make sure that it's a wise decision. And at this point, privatization does not make sense for our school district, and probably won't in the future either. We again, need to learn from other people's decisions. And as usual, this is our monthly meeting, so in front of you is the Head Start financial report. And as you heard last month, we have a new director who has jumped right in to the pool and hit the ground running over there, and has been part of a lot of meetings that I have been in attendance, and the enthusiasm that she is bringing to the staff over there and getting them reinvigorated for another school year needs to be mentioned at this meeting. Again, they're in the process of enrollment, so if you have a neighbor kid or grandchild or somebody that is interested in our programs, we have great preschool programs over at the Stottlemyre Center, including our Head Start program. And if you don't qualify for Head Start, we've got GSRP program, we've got Sparky, we've got all kinds of things to offer our little preschoolers. So take a look at it, find a program that suits your needs. One of the other things I alluded to earlier was that I got a chance to go to MASB and take some classes last weekend. And again, one of them was on taking a look at the school district when it comes to school safety. Mr. Albrecht and I went to a presentation a couple years ago on the ALICE program that they were rolling out, and the changes that have come across since the ALICE program was brought to school districts. Making sure that our students are safe in our buildings, and also having plans, what happens in case something happens in a building, fire, tornado, whatever. Luckily, we live in an area where we don't have to deal with tornadoes. Another one class that I took was on student achievement, which, you know, one of the things we talked about with our attorney was the board policies dealing with curriculum and student achievement. And the last class I took on was an ethics class, which was very interesting. A lot of things that I learned. We are so far above the curve. I'm so proud of our school district, the work that we have done in the past, making sure that we are on the ball when it comes to being right up front with everything that we do in this district. So I'm very proud to sit on this board, to be in this school district. We're doing a good job. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Walker.
Thank you. You know, I wasn't going to say anything tonight, but since my colleagues had brought up about the privatization, one thing since I have been on this board, my stance has always been that we're a family here. And a large number of our employees are family members to us who live in the district, who kids go to our district, and it wouldn't benefit us to privatize our family. It wouldn't help our community. It wouldn't help our school district. It wouldn't help us at all, because we would be putting out our own community, the people we live next to, or the people that we shop and we live with. We would be putting them out of a job. So how can that help us? So just with that being said, my thought process has always been no. It will continue to be no. And no matter what happens, it's going to always be no. And so that's it. And that's all I have to say. So just no. That's how I feel.
Thank you very much. Mr. Griffin.
Well, I'm not going to reiterate what my officers of the school board have said tonight, because I concur with all the things that have been said here. I do want to make one point. We're one of the largest school districts in the state of Michigan, but we have the lowest funding per pupil of any 333 districts in Michigan. And yet this board does not have a deficit. And, you know, I don't want to say too much about the state saying, well, you need a 5%. Well, sure. If you can afford to do that, still maintain your program. So this board has chose to have slightly less than that and still maintain the programs that our students have. I have been to many schools that are privatized. I've had a lot of experience with it myself personally on the other side. And I can tell you it's not what it's cracked up to be. It's not, in my opinion, the panacea that lets us do well in educating our students. And I'm opposed to it for the lots of reasons that if it were to come up, I'd have those laid out. But the officers here tonight have stated exactly my feelings for the same reasons that Dr. Weaver, Ms. Medell, and Ms. Walker have stated, and I concur with those. And I think we're on the right track. And I think our employees are valuable. They do a good job. They like our district. They like our kids, and they're part of our family. And that's important, I think. Thank you.
Mr. Griffin. Ms. Hines?
I also concur with the board members. Representation to me is really not right. When I went on the tour with a lot of the teachers, a lot of these people that work in the district, they've been lifelong residents. They were students of the district. They came back. A lot of them come back for years to give back to the community. And to me, that is important. Just as Shauna said before, these are our family members. We are a family at Wayne-Westland Community Schools. And to me, it's important, even with the pride. like when I see the bus drives, like the Wayne-Westland Community Schools buses, I get so excited to see we're a school district that has our own buses. The janitorial, the schools are so clean. I mean, the buildings are in really good shape, and to me, it's very important for us to keep the employees that we do have. So I am against privatization. And on a positive note, I was able to go to the conference with the MSAB. It took a lot of classes. I took a policy class, a budget class, school law, and with labor relations. And it's like, as a new member, it's so much to learn. It's so important because now everything is starting to come together. Like when we did our budget, now the lines, they make sense. Everything is starting to come into order. So it was really helpful, those classes, and I learned a lot over the weekend. And I'm excited to go back again in October to take some more classes.
Thank you. Mrs. Madison.
I'd first like to start out by saying that our school district at all levels has been phenomenal with delivering information to the board, pretty much at the moment, especially with electronics today. With that being said, this rumor that has been going around is so much a big, large piece of a rumor mill. I was unaware of the rumor until about 10 minutes before the meeting. So I would like to just really express to everybody that it's very important to try to not get stuck into rumors and really go off with the facts, where the information comes from, and if there was any information that was important and to be delivered, where your resources would be that you would be getting that information from. And it's very important to know that the culture of the school board, along with the district leadership, has been and will remain to support all of our staff. With that being said, I think it's been made very clear in past and here currently tonight from the board that we've made it clear that privatization is not an option, has not been an option, nor will it be an option. So I would like for us to start moving forward with that and really coming together as a family and keeping in mind what we really need to be focusing on right now is the beginning of the school year. We have a lot to look forward to. We have team teaching coming up and a lot of great programs that have been in place, been improved, staying the same and a little bit changing. Let's just focus on getting the school year off with a great start.
Thank you. Well, it's been a little longer meeting tonight than the last one we had, but I think we've got a lot of good things accomplished. Maybe the most important thing that we've done is the review of the policy. These changes are going to benefit the board in the years to come. It's going to make us more aware of what is and is not going on. As wonderful as this document is, by its very size, it's difficult to deal with. So abbreviating it, it's going to be the classic case of less is more. My hat is off to the teachers who are undertaking, for the first time in many years, the team teaching concept. I think that they're going to enjoy that. I think they're going to grow from that. If they're happy in their approach to the kids in the classroom, I can't see how it can do anything but promote additional learning. So I'm really excited for them and for our students. And I understand teaming isn't for everybody. I do understand that. In just about every walk of life, spring is the time of rebirth, not in education. We're entering the period of rebirth right now. Fall, when the buses get fired up and the kids start showing up willingly in some cases to hop on those buses and come to school, and the teachers show up. Well, you know what? Those teachers are already in the buildings, many of them. They're already preparing their classrooms. They're already getting their syllabus in order. That's already started. Our bus drivers have already gone through the preliminary work. Our custodians are putting the finishing touches on those summer renovations, those summer cleanup projects. And I guess that's where I jump in with my fellow board members and say, we have to appreciate the good work that all of our employees do. If it's true that it takes a whole village to raise a kid, then it takes a whole school district to educate one. No matter how good our classroom teachers are, if that cafeteria worker doesn't deal with the child appropriately, that kid's going to have a bad day. No matter how well our teacher might handle the situation during the day, if that kid is getting off the bus and he's had a bad day with the bus driver, or the bus driver hasn't intervened in a confrontation between two kids, that kid's going to have a bad day. We're a team. We always have been. Anyone who thinks that any one part of our school district is any more important than any other part has missed something somewhere. So, along with my fellow board members, I oppose privatization. I always have, and I will continue to do so. And that is it for me for this evening. I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Mrs. Madison,
Support.
second. Mrs. Walker. This meeting, folks, is adjourned. Have a good evening.